So in today's AI Take, I want to explore the thesis that every line of AI code is going to cost you $1, and that there's a big differential between the token cost of producing a line of code and enterprise-ready capability for an application.
Welcome to the AI Take, powered by 1KE, where in each episode, we unpack one AI lesson and explain why it matters to you and your business. I'm Sidney from Sydney, and as always, I'm joined by Michael Chanter, CEO of 1KE. Michael, welcome. And what is today's AI Take?
Well, thanks, Sid. My thesis for today's AI Take is this. Every line of code in an AI application for enterprise still costs $1. So although we hear about the token cost of code, there's a lot of hidden cost underneath the iceberg that most people don't understand.
So it sounds like if the code's done, we're still not done. There's more costs involved. Why isn't the product finished or the code finished?
Yeah, absolutely. So although we hear a lot about vibe coding, for example, irrespective of how you're doing it, although I think vibe coding has definitely made this challenge more visible, there's a difference between working code that proves something can happen and the problem really being solved safely, reliably, repeatably, and most of that is invisible in your first iteration.
And so what does vibe coding make us, why does it make us feel further ahead?
Yeah, so you can get to the 80% point very quickly, and most people understand that's the case. But when you start looking at enterprise usage, you need to understand all of the edge cases, for example. So what happens when someone doesn't save something properly, or we drop a system, or access to a gateway fails, or any of those things. And a lot of that work can be significant, like a big multiple of the original sort of proof of concept, if you like.
Just this week, Hormozy posted something that said people used to waste their time doing shit that didn't matter. Now they are vibe coding shit that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I don't think this is directly related to that, but what we are saying is there is a element of additional things that go on. So what sits outside of the code that people see?
Yeah, so things like security and identity, permissions, auditability. As I said earlier, typically when you start and you're doing a little bit of a proof and you can connect two things together and see the data move, people feel as though they've achieved the outcome that they needed. But as I said earlier, there are often many complexities around things like, for example, asynchronous processes where two things could be happening simultaneously in the application. You need to deal with that. Typically, when you're dealing with an AI via a gateway or something, that's an asynchronous process. So you're waiting for a response. Building all of the things around deployment and recovery and all of those things. If you lose connectivity to AI, for example, all of those things are particularly complex problems, and in the end, still require a really high quality understanding of how to architect software properly.
You'd think AI would be doing this by now, right?
Yeah, and I think it will. So AI will it'll still reduce the effort in achieving those things. But as we've said earlier, the judgment doesn't go away. So, for example, understanding all the edge cases is something that many people don't have much knowledge of. So, for example, I read a funny article yesterday saying that vibe coders are declaring that we no longer need databases because they can just store it all in flat files or something. Those types of statements are sort of ridiculous, and they articulate very well the fact that that there's a lack of understanding about some of the architectural principles. Now, that's not to say that high quality developers don't understand that, and of course they do. They still have good quality architectural knowledge. But my point is that with the architectural knowledge, they also recognise that there's still a cost associated with doing things properly, right?
Cool. So we're talking about the overall cost, and lines of code has traditionally been referred to, and engineers would argue that that's not a good metric.
No.
What's your view on that?
True. Lines of code. In fact, AI can generate enormous amounts of rubbish, and so the volume is not really the outcome. But the metric comes from, to achieve meaningful outcomes, you're going to need a meaningful amount of code, no matter what. So if I think about what we've done in 1KE, we have millions of lines of code in our application. The metric that I'm calling out is that when you are building high quality code and complex code, the effort required the cost required needs to encompass everything. At the moment, there's a very big focus on the token cost. That doesn't really recognize what's the cost of understanding how the workflows should operate. What's the cost of understanding the real business operation that you're trying to build an analog for? What's the effort around security and resiliency in your application code? All of those things are the effort in writing the line is just the tip of the iceberg. And that's really the point, is that line of code has to have had a lot of thought, a lot of process, and a lot of deep, iterations to get it right. And frankly, we've learned this the hard way. I
was going to say, it almost sounds like
we've lived this, right?
it almost sounds like you brought up the topic, but you've hit a nerve with yourself. Sounds like it's come from some battle scars building 1K. What have we learnt there?
Yeah, I think you need to be. What we've learned the hard way probably is that you can prototype quickly, and you can get to a sense of achievement quickly. Again, a topic we've covered in previous discussions, but then taking it from that initial prototype that is a great proof of concept. AI is brilliant for that. I mean, proving that it's possible, great. So there's a very big difference between proving it's possible and delivering a production outcome. And that's the differential that we've learned over, I was going to say months, but probably more than months now, more than a year we've invested in learning that.
Yep. So your thesis is it's costing us $1. Could it go down? Could it eventually become closer to zero or closer to the cents rather than the dollar?
My sense is no. And the reason I say that is generation of the line of code will become almost free. Like that's not really the issue, is that people are focused on that. That's the wrong metric. The metric should be what's the human cost of understanding the problem, managing your data, getting a handle on your workflows, building all the architectural resilience in around the applications, making sure that they have resilience, that they can recover into different regions. All of that work still requires a lot of thought and human intervention. And the reality is that the core of your application, the problem domain, is never going to reside within the AI. The problem domain is always going to be owned by us. And there is a real and existential cost that you cannot mitigate using cheaper tokens.
Right. And so what would be the advice for technology partners playing in the channel?
I think that the key is that understanding the problem is critical. So I think there's two elements to this. The first is understanding the problem. That work needs to be done thoughtfully and deeply. That's the first point. The second point is enterprise engineering is non-negotiable if you're going to build enterprise-grade outcomes. And it's not about the effort to, for example, improve your security at a code level. It's about understanding what actually needs to happen before you do that.
Right. So one thing for people to remember from today's tech?
I think just AI has made the code cheap, line by line.
Yep.
But it's not taken away the complexity of understanding the problems and understanding how to ensure that it's the right code. So in the same way as, a CEO's job is not to do the work, but make the right decisions about what work needs to be done.
Yep.
I think if you're building enterprise code, which is you're using AI to build enterprise code, that's fine, but you need to ensure that you're building the right code and you're doing it the right way.
Excellent. So that's this week's AI Tech. If you found this useful, please like and share and subscribe to our channel. We'll be back next episode where we take one AI lesson, break it down, and explain why it matters to you and your business.